At 12 o'clock. Folks are still coming in. We will start here in about another 30 seconds to appreciate and recognize your time. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So it looks like we have a good quorum of attendees and growing. And given that we have some pretty good content for this session today, we're going to start on time and get going. But once again, welcome. My name is Kai Jackson, the managing director for the Reaching at Promise Students Association. And I'm very happy to be here in partnership with ACCBE, with UCLA, and the California County Superintendents Association, and you all, our community of practice and our community of learning. Today's session will focus on UCLA's report, which looks at improving California alternative education system and rethinking California's alternative education system. There's a specific focus on our alternative schools and our county offices of ed. And so we're just super excited for this information today and to be with you. We would ask that we can introduce ourselves into the room and a little bit of an icebreaker. If you can go to the next slide by putting your name, your organization, and your titles into the chat. That way we know who we're in the room with, and I know we're here with our people. So I know we're here with our right folks. And so if you can put that in the chat, that would be very excellent. Next slide, please. All right, by way of agenda, we'll do some introductions. We'll have a brief overview for ACCBE and RAPSA. We'll talk about our session goals, and I'm super excited to hear from our dear colleague and professor, Dr. Joseph Bishop from UCLA. We will also have the great opportunity to hear from two leaders throughout California, and they're in Yolo County Office of Ed and in Placer County Office of Ed, and on superintendent reflections. And then we will have an opportunity for Q&A, reflection, and feedback. And so with that, next slide, and I'd like to turn it over to my friend and colleague, David Patterson, Secretary of ACCBE.
Well, thank you, Kai. On behalf of the Association of California County Boards of Education, I want to welcome everybody to this webinar. We're excited to bring this diverse group of people together in a shared mission to serve some of California's most at-risk, at promise students. As it said, I'm Dave Patterson. I'm a retired educator, and this is my 14th year of service on the Placer County Board of Education. I also serve as the Vice President for ACCB's Board of Directors. The Association of California Boards of Directors, or ACCB, is the voice and the organization of county boards of education. We're an independent 501c3. We're a nonprofit. Our members include 47 county boards of education, and we are growing. And we are new in the sense we're in our third year, but we're also rich in experience to draw upon, frankly, 60 decades 60 years of experience with county boards of education when county boards were a section of CSBA. Next slide, please. Our mission is simple. ACCB empowers county boards of board members to be confident advocates for all students. And our vision is also clear. We're the leading voice of county boards of education, focusing on improving outcomes for students, families, and communities. Next slide, please. We're also driven by four key pillars. The first one is advocacy and amplify as the leading voice of county boards of education. It's also about partnership. ACCB is committed to building a strong partnership with our partners, the California Superintendents Association and each and every county superintendent. Our third pillar is about engage, elevate, and empower. And that's about ourselves. We're ensuring that we as board members are well equipped to fulfill our responsibilities. And finally, but very important, we're also forward looking. We're an organization that's committed to seeking solutions, to being innovative, to go beyond the status quo. And with that, I'll turn it back to Kai.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And let me affirm that RAPSA is very proud and happy to have this partnership with ACCBE in our community of learning. But without further ado, I really would love to introduce Dr. Joseph Bishop. We have part of his bio there. He has a very extensive background, and you can read that. But what I would tell you is having spoke with, learned from, and continuing to interact with Joe, he is first an amazing human, but his depth of knowledge and the team at UCLA Center for the Transformation of Schools is providing data and research and information to our community of learning and practice that you can't find anywhere else. We understand that there's lots of data and research out there, particularly, for example, the getting down to facts, but a lot of those almost 80 reports don't focus on alternative education. And so to be able to have Dr. Bishop here with us from UCLA to speak about this seminal body of work, we are honored to have you here with us and very appreciative of that. And without further ado, let's love to introduce you to Dr. Joseph Bishop from UCLA CTS.
Thank you, Kai. Thank you to RAPSA and ACCBE for inviting me to be part of this conversation. And I just want to thank you. If you're a member of a county board of education right now serving, I want to thank you for your service. A lot of people have no idea what county boards of education do or the type of oversight they have or frankly, the responsibility to approve of charters or school sites and to be a kind of a safeguard for kids. So when we think about alt ed and DOS schools, we'll say DAS or DOS. The counties, all 58 counties and leaders in those counties and superintendents who are on this call play a really, really important role. And I think we probably need to do a better job as a whole of helping folks understand what county boards of education do and why they are so integral to as part of our education system, but our democracy more broadly. I think we're going to jump to the next slide. Um,
We're going to transition to your slide deck, Joe.
okay, beautiful. Take your time. And Geneva Summer, communications director, who's my partner in crime, is on the call. And Geneva is going to help us advance slides. So the Center for the Transformation of Schools been around. We've been around for 9 years. I co-founded the center with Pedro Noguera, who's now the dean at that one institution across the way from UCLA. But we do a lot of work centered on young people, typically who are not served well in traditional public schools, or who have been overlooked. But I'm going to give you a very, very brief overview of a report I co-author with another colleague Hui Huang, and Hui was the lead author. But it's called Beyond One Size Fits All Education Approaches, Rethinking California's Alt Ed System. And to start, you're going to hear DOS or Alt Ed interchangeably. DOS, just to be clear, is a designation given by the California Department of Education for alt schools and programs that serve at-risk populations or high-risk youth, or at promise, as we'd say at RAPSA, which is a very, very broad term. But I just want to capture that the Stewart, or give you some context, the Stewart Foundation and others have been asking us for several years to do a landscape analysis of alt ed in California. This is a high-level overview of months and months of work for our team to look at publicly available data. I want the purpose of this conversation is not to make anybody feel guilty or to point fingers. It's just to elevate data that's been sitting and to bring some focus to schools and young people that I would argue do not get enough attention and are not only in terms of funding, but also in terms of support and accountability. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so, oh, thank you, Cassidy, for running the slides. I thought Geneva was doing it. Appreciate it. I'll try not to go too fast. So just to give you a sense of the universe. So the universe of alt ed in California is approximately 150,000 students. And I gave you that quiz question answer. What does DAS stand for? But DAS schools are a critical space for learning. I just want to focus a space for learning. And this report gets into the nuances of alt ed in California, looking at one, who are young people served in our alt ed system, We're going to also look at school climate patterns and look at academic outcomes for DAS versus non-DAS. And I just want to point out that our way of collecting data for the state is an imperfect, imprecise way. And by collecting all data in a DAS umbrella, we lose a lot of the nuances. So as I get into this report, you're going to understand more. Thank you, Kai, for dropping that in the chat. You're going to understand more of the nuances of DAS schools, not as a homogenous group, but as a very diverse, powerful group of schools that are serving young people, and I would say places where we can learn from. And yes, there's room for growth, but learning is happening in pretty profound ways. And I would argue that our accountability system, oddly enough, currently makes it a liability to serve young people with the highest needs in our school systems. And I think to some degree, DAS schools have been penalized for playing that role historically. Okay, so Act 1, again, student characteristics. Act 2, school climate patterns. Act 3, academic outcomes. Next slide, please. Okay, so the types of schools. I said it's not a homogeneous group. So very briefly, I'm not going to define the types, but we have continuation schools, community day schools, county community schools, juvenile court schools. Next slide, please. Opportunity schools, alt schools of choice, special ed schools, district special ed consortia, and alt schools by application, which is mostly charter schools, which I know counties have to approve. If districts say this site may not be a charter, it goes to the county level. So those are the school types. Now let's shift over to the who. Who is the universe of alt ed for young people? Perfect. Next slide. Okay. Here's a high-level overview of our main findings when looking at the data, and the report is pretty long, but it gives you a lot of the nuances. But finding one, Black, Latina, and Indigenous students are overrepresented in DAS schools. So if you look on the left side of your screen, the left is DAS numbers, non-DAS is on the right side. So Black, Latino students are overrepresented, and also Indigenous students if we compare DAS versus non-DAS. Next slide, please. And if we're using the language vulnerable student populations, there's a higher proportion, higher concentration of students with greater needs in these schools. So if we look at DAS schools as a whole compared to the whole universe of schools in California, students eligible for Title I, 80% compared to 61. Students with disabilities, almost 1 in 5. Foster youth, 2%. Students experiencing homelessness, it's a higher rate as well. And then English learners, it's a little bit higher for non-DAS schools. But I want to capture too that students have multiple identities, and our data systems are separate out by these categories. So students might touch multiple categories. And I know I've done some work in the court schools where you're working with a student who identifies as a student with disability. They've been in the foster system. They've experienced homelessness, and they're socially disadvantaged. So students will touch multiple categories at once. In one, they have multiple identities, but sometimes the data doesn't capture that. Next slide, please. Just giving you a foundation here. And there's differences by school type. I mentioned it's not a homogeneous group. So when we look at needs, I'm not going to explain each type of school, but the report will help you understand this. This is more of a primer. So, English learners are the darker yellow or brighter yellow, I should say. Migrant students, a lighter blue, and then shades of blue move up from students experiencing homelessness, foster students, foster youth, and students eligible for free and reduced price meals. So when you look by school type, we broke it down by each student groups by school type. Next slide, please. And then when we get into school climate and educational patterns broadly, one of our main findings was that students in alt ed settings face significant challenges related to learning and engagement broadly, school conditions, and academic performance. And as you'll see in the graphs coming up here, suspensions, absenteeism, and dropout rates are higher, while stability, graduation rates, and ELA and math scores are comparatively lower. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we look at engagement, the lighter blue is DAS, the darker blue is non-DAS. You can see chronic absenteeism rates are higher, 60%, almost 2/3 of students. School stability rates are lower. I'll get into school stability here in a minute. 5-year grad rates are lower. 5-year dropout rates are higher for DAS schools. Next slide, please. Suspensions are comparatively higher. And when we look at specific racial groups or student groups, we will see higher rates as well when we dig into the numbers, and I report to some of that as well. Next slide, please. Achievement. There are fewer students meeting state standards in English language arts and math across DAS schools. And I just want to point out, again, it varies by school type, but as a whole, when we look at that universe of 150,000 students across our state, performance is comparatively lower. Next slide, please. Finding two, and this gets into our system of support and even our funding mechanisms. Finding two, the nature and extent of educational challenges vary across different types, which I've just pointed out. Emphasizing the need for context-specific or site-specific policies or school type-specific policies that support systems that align with each school's distinct mission and student population. Again, this one-size-fits-all, I'm going to say it over and over again, the one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work for education as a whole. It really, really doesn't work for DAS versus non-DAS schools. And we have to shift as a state. So we're not penalizing schools or kids in the process. Next slide, please. Okay, chronic absenteeism rates are comparatively much lower in non-DAS schools. But when you look for continuation schools, it's the highest, almost 3 out of 4 students are chronically absent in continuation schools. And on the lower scale in court schools. Now, court schools, I know it's a very different type of setting, very different. You have young people in and out who are returning to their community or there's reentry. So again, this is apples and oranges to some degree, but as we look at the common denominator of chronic absenteeism, I think there is deep concern that we don't have enough students, not only as a state, there's too many students missing school, but especially in DAS settings. Next slide, please. School stability. So school stability as a definition refers to, well, stable students are, we're looking at enrollment. It's considered stable if students spend at least 240 days in one school without a disqualifying exit. The calculation for stability is based on, and this is not a slide, I'm just sharing it. Because as I was doing this, I realized people may not understand stability versus non-stability. Stability measures the percentage of public students with a cumulative enrollment who successfully complete the full year. And disqualifying exits or instability refers to students who leave a school due to truancy without subsequent enrollment, expulsion, or unknown reasons. I mean, that's quite broad, but just to give you some context. So in terms of stability, there are fewer students in these settings who are attending school as a whole. Not completely, but in general. Next slide, please. 5-year grad rates. If we look at the non-DAS average, almost 93% for the state. We look at specific DAS schools. Opportunity schools have higher rates closer to the overall average for the state, but grad rates are not where they should be. Next slide, please. And the same is true for 5-year dropout and non-completer rates. The DAS average is more in the middle on this slide, but still shouldn't be where it is, where graduation is not the end goal. It's more preparing young people for the workforce and for life beyond school, and we should be satisfied with these averages as a whole. Next slide, please. Suspension rates. The non-DAS average is around 3.7%. We have higher rates of suspensions. That's in school and out of school. The state calculates out of school. I mean, the reporting is different for in school and out of school, but as a whole, in the aggregate, suspension rates are too high for young people. We know if young people are suspended, the ripple effects are negative over a young person's life and their health and trajectory. Next slide, please. Okay. Academic achievement as a whole for ELA, this slide breaks down, again, differences by school type within the DAS kind of universe. Next slide, please. And these slides will be available if you really want to dig into the data, and the report is available right now for you. Achievement for math is comparatively lower compared to ELA, but highly problematic in terms of students meeting state standards. Next slide, please. Okay, finding three. Students from historically marginalized groups, including highly mobile youth, which would be foster, homeless, justice, involved migrant youth, English learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged students and students with disabilities, in particular, experience systemic barriers that impact their outcomes. And again, as you saw in the earlier slides, DAS schools serve the students with the greatest needs in the state. Now, I'd say some of the most talented people are in our DAS schools. So we have to utilize their talent and support them. Next slide. Chronic absenteeism rates. DAS average is around 60%, but when we dig into specific student types, you can see the rates are higher by student type. So we were looking at school type, now we're getting to student type. Next slide. Stability rates, again, somewhere in the middle for DAS students, but comparatively for racial ethnic groups and student type, the numbers actually are higher. Well, they're higher in terms of, I should say, stability for specific groups, but the DAS average is right in the middle for all groups. Next slide, please. Grad rates is the same as true. Next slide, please. And it's more or less the same for 5-year dropout and non-completer rates. Next slide, please. Suspension rates are highest for American Indian, Alaska, and Native students within the DAS universe of students. Also troublingly high for migrant, foster, and homeless young people. And for young people who are, in particular, Black and experiencing homelessness, the rates for homelessness for suspensions are deeply concerning for our state, even though we've made a lot of movement in a positive direction. Next slide, please. Okay, thinking about a set of questions here. Where does the current alt ed school design fall short, and how should we redesign the system to address those gaps? We get into that a little bit here. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the recommendations. And some of them in the current budget environment, people might roll their eyes or look at me like I'm crazy. But what strikes me about alt schools, alt ed in California is it's not a huge universe. And young people in DAS schools are really the canary in the coal mine for a lot of bigger systemic structural issues. And if we could support young people in DAS schools, the entire system universally would be so much stronger. So one of the recommendations, develop an LCFF category for alt schools. I know there's a lot of controversy around, do you follow by student type, by school type? I think we need to rethink our funding formula altogether. Although it's groundbreaking, there's room for improvement in terms of getting dollars to kids. We need to think about the workforce. So we dig into this a little bit more in the report, but we need a workforce that is ready to work in alt settings and alt systems. And currently, we don't have a clear pipeline. There are specific examples of places where it's happening, but it's not in a concerted statewide fashion, given the scale and size of our state and the need of our state. Item or recommendation 3, we need to prioritize school stability. Fundamentally, especially in the current political and social environment, making schools stable, safe places should be our primary concern. And reducing mobility to make young people feel welcome and supported is central to frankly, our mission as a state. So prioritizing stability, reducing mobility, and providing targeted assistance. So when you look at, when I shared those numbers, what strikes me is for all the good things happening in our system of support, how non-targeted or direct or explicit we've been around DAS schools and specific student types and geography and areas. The one-size-fits-all system of support does not work for DAS schools. It also, training for board members. You all are on this call, but you're a fairly small universe of board members. We need unique training for folks to have the capacity and leadership to know how to navigate navigate and support school types that typically, not always, are overlooked. We need to think about meaningful measures and accountability systems. What I said earlier was we cannot make serving young people a liability. And in our current system, even if young people can move up 2 or 3 grade levels within a subject area, if the school as a whole is, if there's still performance challenges as a whole, the growth of that individual student does not show up in the dashboard. And I've seen firsthand some schools doing incredible work. They don't meet the dashboard threshold, and they're no longer, their charter is not authorized, and the years of work is kind of, we throw out the baby with the bathwater. So I think as a state, in thinking about a new governor and a new education system or governance system, which everybody's talking about, we have to think about a different way of looking at measures of progress for young people. And I think that's our challenge. I think I'm going to challenge all of you to give specifics when people ask, what would a new accountability system look like? And what would meaningful measures look like? I know you have them locally, but doing that at scale is really hard to do in a state like California. Number five, we need to think about, again, learning. How do we expand access to high quality differentiated instruction, especially in geographically isolated settings? All 58 counties are quite different, even within counties, which folks might consider as a urban county. You travel across the county and you realize it's cities within a city and districts within a district. So we need that differentiated approach to instruction and to technical assistance and to support. And again, on the front end, rethinking, like, are we designing our systems to serve young people and helping and setting ourselves up for success, or are DAS schools the last stop to address the issues that we haven't addressed in other places? So those are the recommendations. They can be much more specific, I would say, for county boards of education, but I encourage you to take these ideas and operationalize them at your county level to think about what they mean. I think some of you are already in the business of doing this work, but hopefully you can use this report as leverage to move on a mission that more people should be paying attention to. So I'm going to stop there and just want to thank you all for your time and attention. I know at lunchtime, the last thing you might want to do is be on a Zoom call, but I thank you for being here and for our organizations for organizing this really important conversation.
Outstanding. Thank you, Dr. Bishop. I appreciate it very, very much. And Jeffrey, I see you have your hands up. We will have an opportunity for Q&A and to have some actual discussion here just in a short while. But just by admin note, for those that would like to begin to queue up their questions, you can begin to put those in the chat. But we will be using the raise hand function here in just a short bit. But Joe, thank you. And I totally agree that this is some data that can be used to help lift up the work and as proof points for those that are advancing policy and practices around alternative schools. So thank you. In terms of the next steps, one of our session learning goals is to connect and then to understand and gain insights with behind your data, and then to also ground ourselves sort of in the data and information, and then to hear directly from those that are on the front lines or in leadership positions on the front line. So next, we're going to hear from Dr. Susan Connolly Fox, Associate Superintendent of Student Services at Placer County. She's been serving in education for more than 30 years in a number of positions. And then she's also a member of the California CPAG, California Practitioners Advisory Group. And you can see part of her bio there. We'll also hear from Dr. Garth Brooks, who is superintendent there at Yolo County, has more than 20 plus years and a 29-year career in education, and has been a paraeducator. I love the work that they're doing there at Yolo County, even being one of the state's schools for the pilot program for high school redesign. And I'll just, and I have to say this, I'm very proud and honored to bear witness to his leadership as the first African American to serve as an elected county superintendent at Yolo County. So without further ado, why don't I turn it over to Susan and Garth. First, Susan, to get some of your thoughts around the report and the work that you're doing, and then we'll hear from Garth. How about that?
Thank you so much. And you gave me a doctorate, which I really appreciate, but I'm not gonna take it because I didn't earn it. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this conversation. I really do appreciate this report because it does something so important. It elevates the role of alternative education in California and makes clear that these settings are not peripheral, that they are central to serving students with the greatest need. And more than that, it helps us reframe alternative education not as a lesser version of the traditional system, but as a different design built to meet students where they are. At the same time, I want to offer a practitioner's lens because if we truly see these schools as a different design, then we have to look differently at how we measure success and interpret the data. And from my perspective, overseeing a county community school, which also happens to be a charter school, a court school, and a regional special education program, some of these indicators don't always mean what they appear to mean. The report highlights several important findings. Alternative schools disproportionately serve students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, have disabilities, are foster youth, and students experiencing homelessness. And we have those outcomes on traditional measures that are significantly lower. For example, higher chronic absenteeism, lower grad rates, especially the 4 and 5 year cohort, I will say, lower performance on standardized assessments. But critically, the report also acknowledges that these outcomes are shaped by high student mobility, short enrollment periods, and systemic barriers outside of school. These data points are not simply measures of school effectiveness, they are reflections of the realities that our students are navigating. So what should we be actually measuring? From a practitioner standpoint, I would argue that we already measure success differently at the local level, and I'm wondering how we can leverage that local level information to come up with a statewide system of accountability that better reflects the work we do. In our county community school and court school programs, we focus heavily on growth, engagement, and access, not just proficiency. That includes academic growth over time. We always track our 1-year graduation rate, student engagement and connection, access to meaningful pathways like career education and post-secondary preparation, credit attainment and recovery, and successful transitions out of alternative settings. So when we think about outcomes, we're asking, are students growing academically? Are they re-engaging? And are they building a path forward? These are the kinds of measures captured in LCAPs, especially our LCAPs, and they tell us much more about student progress than any single data point or traditional metric. So I'd like to reframe a few of the key metrics that were in the report. The report highlights stability as a concern, but I would like to add some nuance to that. In court schools and to some extent county community schools, low stability is expected and students are placed for short determined periods of time. So for example, in Placer County, 95% of our students in our county community or in our county court school are there for 5 days or less. They may come additional times in the year, but it typically is 5 days or less. Additionally, in our county community school, which serves students who are expelled, students typically are in our program for the semester in which the infraction that caused the expulsion occurred and the following semester, but then they are expected to clear their expulsion and go back to the comprehensive school. So we would expect low stability rates in those particular programs. If stability increases significantly, that's not necessarily a success. It means students spend longer periods in detention or in a school designed for expelled students, which is not necessarily a desirable outcome. On the other hand, in special education settings, higher stability is often seen as a positive, but from an IDEA perspective, we have to ask, are students remaining in some of the most restrictive environments longer than necessary? So stability in both cases is not inherently good or bad. It depends on the context and purpose. The same applies to chronic absenteeism. In some of our regional special education programs, we serve a large population of medically fragile students. There are times when attending school may pose a health risk, or students require home-based medical accommodations. Frequently, these are students that take the California Alternate Assessment, and they have significant medical concerns. And in those cases, absenteeism is not disengagement, it reflects student safety and medical need. So again, we have to be careful not to interpret attendance data without understanding the underlying context of the program. So I think the LCAP as a better model for collecting data for these students, and it's because it's so grounded in local context. LCAPs allow us to look at multiple measures of success, disaggregate by program, and align outcomes to the purpose of each setting. They also support continuous improvement. We analyze data annually, we adjust actions, and we refine strategies based on what's working. And importantly, LCAPs are publicly available, designed for transparency, and written to reflect local context and student need. In many ways, LCAPs already provide the framework for the kind of differentiated accountability this report is calling for. I do want to name a real bright spot in the report. It reframes alternative education as a site of innovation, not just intervention. It highlights practices that are consistently effective, strong relationships, small learning environments, personalized instruction, and integrated supports. That aligns closely with what we see in our county-operated programs. These are environments where students are known, instruction is flexible, and supports are coordinated. It's not a deficit system, it's a different design. And that idea of alternative education as a different design really shows up in the report's recommendations. As we move from identifying what works to thinking about how to scale and support it, the complexity becomes much more visible from a practitioner standpoint. I do want to briefly highlight one of the recommendations in the report, particularly those around building a specialized educator workforce, because I think this is where implementation gets especially complex. The report rightly calls for educators with strong content experience and specialized preparation to support students who often arrive with significant gaps in literacy, numeracy, and engagement. And that absolutely resonates with what I see in practice every day. But I would add an important layer of context, especially for very small or mid-sized alternative schools, including many county community schools and court school settings. In these environments, we often have one teacher responsible for multiple subjects across multiple grade levels, sometimes within the same classroom. So while we're talking about specialization, we also are operating in structures that require teachers to be generalists. That creates a real tension. On one hand, we absolutely need strong content knowledge and specialized preparation, but on the other hand, the structure of a very small school makes it difficult to operationalize traditional models of subject-specific credentialing or departmentalized instruction. That raises some important implementation questions. What does specialized preparation actually look like in a setting where teachers are generalists by necessity? And how do we support educators who are simultaneously teaching English, math, credit recovery, and also serving as case managers and relationship anchors for students? For me, this points to the need for a different type of educator preparation in alternative settings, one that blends cross-disciplinary instructional skills, deep understanding of adolescent development and trauma, and the ability to personalize learning across a wide range of student needs. Because without that nuance, we risk designing systems that work well for larger schools but aren't fully implementable in the smaller, rural, or highly specialized settings where many of our highest need students are actually served. So to wrap up, I have a few closing thoughts. These schools are not trying to replicate the traditional model more efficiently. They are intentionally operating as a different design. We already see that in how we measure success through growth, through re-engagement, and through designing new pathways for students. And we already have tools like LCAPs that allow us to reflect that more fully. The opportunity now is to align policy, accountability, and workforce systems with that reality, not by asking these students or schools to fit a traditional model, but by designing systems that recognize and support what they are actually built to do, to stabilize, to re-engage, and to move students forward in ways that traditional systems often cannot. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate it. Garth?
Kai, I appreciate Susan's comments. Kai, you introduced me as Garth Brooks. I assure
Oh,
you, it's okay. I assure you that I'm Garth Lewis, even though I do have friends in low places. Uh, I appreciate being on the call and part of this conversation. And again, I sit as the county superintendent of schools for Yolo County. This has the report, as I've had a chance to sit with it, read it, hear the share out this afternoon. Really appreciate UCLA's the team's really commitment to uplifting a student population that oftentimes is an afterthought. I will say in our from a traditional lens, from a policy lens, it's certainly the need for us to center what the experiences are, and particularly from a structural lens, I think is really important. So from my perspective, as I think about the findings and the takeaways and some of the most important components of it, I think the demographic information is not surprising to those of us who are practitioners in this space. When I think about, Susan mentioned the many of the student populations that typically we find in alternative education settings. I would just add to that from a racial justice lens. We have, again, overrepresentation of Black and Brown children on a very predictable basis in alternative education settings. And what the study points to, I think rightfully and insightfully, is that those are really indicators of some of the structural and institutional issues that we have within the educational system writ large. We continue to see again the overrepresentation of students of color in these spaces, which in my mind really translates to a challenge, but also an opportunity. If we think about the ability for our educators in this space, as well as administrators, to really think through a lens of some of the historical traumas that students of color and those who support them, the communities and the families that support them, there is a wealth of research to draw upon in our practice, in which we have done. I would offer up work from Dr. Sean Jenwright as an example of practices, the healing center practices that we are drawing upon in our alternative education settings to assist us in being responsive to the structural and institutional inequities inherent in the educational system writ large. So the point here is really expressing appreciation for the researchers who are uplifting the needs of our students, and also taking care to ensure that we are looking at our students from an asset-based lens, rather than oftentimes a deficit lens with blame being placed on our young people. I'll also just share, it's very important, and I think Susan mentioned this in your comments as well, this idea of personalized learning. This is what is, in my mind, is one of the strongest foundations in our alternative education programs. I can tell you right now that the staff in our program know every single one of our students by name. They understand what brings them joy and fulfillment. They have a deep understanding of some of the traumas that they have experienced, and also understand individual supports as well as the aspirations of our young people. Those are the kinds of practices that and mindsets that we are building on, that in fact do allow us to serve as those hubs of innovation that others, frankly, could learn from. Moving to the recommendations, I would say that as I think about the workforce development piece, I'll double down on the idea that youth development or adolescent development as a discipline is critically important in our spaces. So where the report makes a recommendation, it doesn't go as far as to recommend a specialized credential, which I'm glad that's not the case. We potentially create another barrier if we go down that route. But certainly, as we think about the knowledge and the depth of understanding as it relates to human development, youth development in particular, it is critically important from my perspective that training sessions as well as coaching really center the human needs of our young people. our young people that are served through our alternative education settings are really like any other young person that are in our lives. They have experienced trauma. Right, and there are issues that we have to contend with, but certainly at their core, their humanity should be centered in our policy making, in our practice, in our thoughts and intentions in terms of serving them. And from a workforce development perspective, in addition to our teachers, I would expand that to site administrators. I would expand it comments were made earlier, to our board members and those who are at that systems level to help to really guide decision making and prioritization. I would also suggest that as I think about recommendation, the first recommendation regarding the LCFF categorization, I just want to recognize that just a few years ago, the then CCBE, or now ACCBE, the California County Superintendents, along with CSBA, really worked hard with the state legislature, the governor's office, to win $80 million to support court and community schools funding stabilization. And so we celebrate that progress that's been made there. I would also note that changes have been made to the template for the LCAP that are more responsive to our sort of nuanced needs as court and community schools. And again, want to celebrate the progress that's been made in those arenas. In my mind, the biggest takeaway from that recommendation is really the fact that any conversation around policy or funding related to education should center the needs of children and youth who are served through alternative education settings. That means that our professionals who are in the classrooms, who are running programs, who are operating at the cabinet level, are absolutely at the table in those conversations, and that there's a sensitivity, there needs to be really a developing of a sensitivity on the part of the state legislature, policymakers, those who are have the purse strings to really ensure that the needs of our students are centered in those conversations going forward. Lastly, I'll end on this note. From my perspective, there are a couple of pieces that are missing from the report, or the report in its current iteration is silent on. One is student voice. And in most cases, with the colleagues who I've had close relationships with through county operated programs and county superintendents who I have close relationship with, the centering of student voice is part of our practice. So thinking about students, not only from the lens of what they're experiencing currently in our system, but what are their recommendations? What is their vision of what could be? And how do they describe the success that they've had, and what do they attribute that to? Those are really important insights. I'll just share a quick story. Just earlier or late last week, we celebrated a graduation of 5 students from our community school program. One of the students who won a scholarship, very articulate about his 3-year pathway in growth, and his vision of himself as a film director. That young man really, in my mind, really embodies this idea of student voice and the value that their articulation of what helps them to succeed, what fulfills them, what brings them joy, really helps in shaping the redesign efforts. As Kai mentioned, we feel very fortunate that we're one of 14 organizations involved in the secondary school redesign effort, and certainly we are centering student voice in our redesign project. The last piece, I think, is in terms of what's missing, or what the report is silent on, is the opportunity for us to think about a shared accountability system. And what I mean by that is we have a number of sectors and institutions who are responsible for the well-being, the safety, the educational attainment. It isn't only an education system's responsibility. When I think about our partners in probation and child welfare, the community-based organizations who serve our young people, I would again think about ways that we can expand structurally and think about accountability in a way that helps to integrate our responsibilities such that we're thinking through a common sort of shared commitment, shared accountability lens when we're at the table through AB 2083 with the interagency leadership team as an example, or the Juvenile Justice Commission that our probation partners are required to offer up. So with that, I'll just reiterate great appreciation for the conversation, for the researchers out of UCLA that are really helping to uplift this conversation, and look forward to continuing to work shoulder to shoulder with you all.
Outstanding. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. You are still a rock star for sure. Uh, thank you. We really want to get into hearing from our audience too, but let me just sort of double tap on a few things that were shared. One, that alternative schools can be places of innovation and are sites of innovation. And then also the collaborative nature of this work that we're all embarking in. As I just look on the screen here, I see the SACSWA, who are the time and attendance folks. I see charter schools. I see visions. I see community-based organizations. I see COEs, LACO. I see leaders. I see workforce development folks from counties and Orange County Department of Ed. So these are your people. We are in a very collaborative space, which Dr. Lewis spoke about. And to Jeffrey's question, I responded in the chat, yes, OICR, and Dr. Lewis hit on it, is a part of this work as well. And so we are engaging them so that we have a truly unique and diverse community of practice that breaks down silos during this very active period of time of policy change. At RAPSA, we believe that there is a window. The window is open to shaping how this policy and redesign works, lands on schools, and not as objects of reform, but as innovation sites, as Garth said, where California can learn what developably responsive, context responsive, and redesign oriented secondary education looks like. And with that, there are a lot of questions in the chat. I'll start there. Please use the raise your hand function, and we love to, and we can come off of mute. But I know, Jeffrey, one of your questions was how can folks with lived experience, peer support specialists, get involved in supporting youth at promise and alternative education settings, and also compensate. And so I'm not sure if that's a question for Susan or Garth or Joe um,
Um,
on that one.
Kai, can we have the PowerPoint taken off for a second so when people unmute, we actually might see them?
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Could I give that? And then maybe it's one to come back to how can folks with lived experience, peer support specialists, so I'm assuming young folks, perhaps opportunity youth themselves, getting involved in supporting this work and be compensated. Am I getting it right, Jeffrey?
Yes, you are. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Mata. I'm the co-founder and executive director of La Cura Collective. Our mission is to dismantle the school to prison pipeline, and how we plan on doing that is by having peer support specialists in alternative education settings, whether it's inside court schools, continuation schools, community day schools, and so forth. And as we begin these conversations out here in Monterey County, I've been connecting with the OYCR, with the Rising Scholars Network, Project Rebound, Underground Scholars, and so forth. And there's a dire need to have folks with lived experience that have successfully navigated these systems that are not designed for us. They were never intended to make us thrive and successful. I appreciate UCLA's report. This was phenomenal. It only reaffirms my lived experience, and looking at the data, right, and how youth of color are predominantly in these spaces, disproportionately affected. It's similar to prison. Someone who has gone to prison, and if you look at the data now, There's majority of Latinos and black and brown folks inside these corrections facilities. So I think this would be a good question, that all three can answer. I really enjoyed Garth Dr. Garth Lewis, his his storytelling, and then just one thing that I would, would say would be that I know that these settings are not right. That I don't like. I'm a very anti-deficit mindset individual, and I know that stability is expected in certain things, but that should not be the norm. That is because it's expected that it's okay. I truly believe that having folks with lived experience, centering the youth, right, because they're also experts in their lived experience, could dramatically transform the way youth sees themselves.
And if we had a microphone, we would drop it. What I can say from Raps is we'd love to follow up with you. We do have a lived experience session, and we love to sponsor you from that. I put my info in the chat. Follow up with me if you're available in November.
And
I will be following up.
I would just say I totally agree with the points that you made there. Jeffrey, appreciate you coming on to share your perspective. And I'd say that we partner both on the county office side as well as the probation side with individuals with lived experience. And certainly there are insights and wisdom that folks have as a consequence of having walked in the steps of our youth directly, and that absolutely should inform and does inform our practice. And I would, again, the point I made earlier regarding youth voice and ensuring that youth voice are centered as co-designers, as co-constructors of programs, and of the practices that we hold up, I think is critically important. Really, it's the research, the lived experience, the policy lens. Really a synthesis of those that in our practice has been most successful. Lots to learn still, for sure, but certainly agree with the points that you made.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. And just the reason that this is so deeply resonating with me is because coming from the school to prison pipeline and now going to get my master's at the University of Southern California. This is something that I want to show you that you can do it. That what I mean. You have this full support. So if you think you want to go to college, you want to go to work, we can make it happen because now is the time. Thank you, Dr. Lewis.
Well, that's exciting, and appreciate that. It's actually motivating, and what brings us here today. I want
Kai?
to, yeah, go right ahead, sir.
This is Dave. I'm going to encourage some of my county board colleagues to also not part of the work here is for us to inform ourselves, and because there are a lot of great things going in within our own 58 counties, but there's also a lot of things that a lot of connections we haven't made, and so I'm interested in some conversations about maybe places where you've made some of those connections. We just saw someone from Monterey County. I know some good connections, but let's see if we can hear some voices there about what you're taking away from this, and how you can see it helping us as a community of county boards be more effective in our work.
This is Yvonne Chan from LACO. I don't think the raise hand work right now for me. So can I proceed to respond to you, Dave?
Please.
Okay. So first of all, very, very appreciative for this session. And LACO, happened to be one of the biggest with many, many, halls and camps, and average like 1,300 kids. So what has happened is we are learning from Kern County. I think Lori's is in this call. Lori's is narrow. And Kern County was able to show LACO. We had the whole team. For the first time, we took our probation rep with us. This has never happened in the decade. So that's one. We visited with Kern County, visited all the housing camps, watched their kids try to repair Tesla out in the fields, and zoom around with whatever golf cart they have, all hands on the Korea Tech. And some of the kids I recognized, they actually came from Laco and they went to Kern. But secondly, it reflects upon us with myself and policymakers, my colleagues, along with Superintendent Duardo, who's really revamping the program and brought in what we call the Compton turnaround team. And we kind of build a whole cabinet level division for these and put in the resources beyond the LCFF and try to bring in special education connection, brought in our going to be new, our equity, because of the Black youth, and Stanley Johnson's with us, and he's really working on that. And also we try to also bring in the wellness division, so that it's not just in this vacuum with alternative ed working on their own. So thank you. This is really helpful. The more I hear about this is we just, as board member, we just have to have the willpower. We don't have to accept what it is. And we have to create what can be and what should be with the support from REPSA, support from UCLA, support from our colleague board members in other counties. And that is going to really make some change. And hopefully, if Laco so big can do it, the rest of us can really, can come together and form this consortium to make it happen. Thanks.
Well, are there any more? I'm going to come from the chat here. We have a little more time, so I'm going to go back to some of our questions in the chat. I see there's a question from Roberto. Is there a way to connect some of this work connected to Prop 1 funding where mental health support for education is being organized? Some of the alternative education students need additional supports, and since funding is shifted to more locally controlled funding, could Prop 1 support alternative ed in the short term or long term? So with that, I have to defer. We have to defer to our school leaders, to Garth. I know Susan departed, and perhaps some of our other COE leaders.
Yeah, I would say that there are absolutely opportunities to leverage Prop 1 dollars. The important piece is to be at the table. So locally, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with Prop 1, but essentially it shifted the Mental Health Services Act to the Behavioral Health Services Act. It requires a 30% investment on the part of the county government to go towards housing, and then some other set asides for intervention or prevention, early intervention. But in terms of each county is responsible for community engagement to inform their Behavioral Services Act plan and their spending plan. And so in order for us to access those dollars, we have to be involved and engaged at the table in those sessions. And so we've worked very closely with our behavioral health department here in the county to ensure that educators are in fact at the table, that youth advocates are at the table in those conversations, and youth themselves as well.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir. And Bina, I'm going to call out your question next, because I think you can articulate it much better than I can if you're able to come off of mute.
Yeah. Do you want me to ask the question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So my interest and curiosity is around the state high school redesign funding. And, the 5 principles, I think, apply really well to our court and community schools. I think we're doing a lot of that work, some more than others. But I guess I'm wondering, do you think that I don't get the sense that a lot of the grantees, I think some of them are definitely working in alt ed space, but I don't know how many are actually working with their court and community schools. I think, Garth, you are in your county, but I just feel like it's a potential resource that um, could maybe accelerate some of the good work going on in our court and community schools and also just lift up because I think, I can't remember, I think Dr. Bishop said that most people don't know what we do, county offices. And I think this could be a way to really lift up the good work we're doing and grow it and help our kids do better. So I guess, Garth, I'd be curious about your thoughts because I know there's supposedly going to be maybe 50 more million bucks coming out if the budget gets passed the right way.
Yeah, I would say absolutely, Bina, the redesign work from a networking perspective has been, absolutely invigorating and exciting. I'm not aware of any of the other grantees who are working in the court and community school space. We do feel very fortunate to have that opportunity, and I would agree that the principles that are espoused as part of this redesign effort, they align well with many of the other reform efforts that are, whether you're talking the full service community school work that's happening, CYBHI, the Portrait of a Graduate. There certainly is a tremendous amount of overlap with the work that we're doing, and I mean, my hope is that additional county offices would not only apply but be successful in that application should those funding opportunities become available. I am hoping that the state continues to fund those who are in the pipeline already, in addition to bringing on new grantees as the work is just really getting underway. So I'll just make that plug as well.
Dr. Lewis, I would agree with you. And Bina, to your question, for the sake of expediency, I put some in the chat. The dollar investments in California is very important, and definitely we hope at least that 50 million for the next sort of round of high school redesign, takes shape. So I would just note that it's also not just about the dollar amount, but about the implementation piece. And we think now is the opportunity, and it's the folks that are here in this room to shape how the implementation ultimately sort of plays out and who's at the table. So I dovetail and agree with everything Dr. Lewis said. It's hard for me to see hands. I see Erica's
Um,
hands up. Oh,
yes.
go
Yes,
ahead.
I was going to say Erica's got her hand up and she's been waiting patiently. So why don't you go there?
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself to this group. My name's Erica Peterson. I am the state director for the California Association of Supervisors of Child Welfare and Attendance. And the purpose for wanting to introduce myself was in the earlier commentary about, how can we get more involved and learn more about these issues, et cetera. I wanted to extend the resources that CASCWA offers. We offer regional trainings, around the state. We have 4 regions across California. We have a professional development event coming up in Modesto in August, where we'll be talking about student mental health, student attendance. And so for county boards and board members, especially those that are maybe newer to board role, looking to get educated on the issues around promise students and the interventions that are possible to prevent students from being placed in DAS placements. I wanted to just let you know that we're available. We would welcome an opportunity to collaborate with you, Dr. Patterson. We partner with RAPSA currently, and so we are here to also support. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Erica, thank you for that. Your community of practice too, the time and attendance folks, I don't mean to sort of narrow them, but when Erica's talking about, attendance, she's not really speaking your child was absent for a day or 2 days. They're the folks that call you, hey, your kid hadn't been to school in 2 months or 3 months, right?
Right.
And so elevating sort of not just chronic absenteeism, but taking it one or two levels below the dermis. And so thank you for being here and
Thank you.
whoever mentioned sort of expanding this community here,
Mhm.
that's one example. And so you're with your people, and I hope we'll all have a chance to connect out of here.
Absolutely.
Um,
And I hope that county board members connect with their people services divisions, right? To hear straight from those who are knocking on the doors to know what the issues are in their communities. That's the connection and opportunity in this type of collaboration, which excites me. So thank you, Kai.
okay.
I, I really appreciate that. Let me add another comment because I do believe from what I'm hearing is, and I reflect back on school change issues and all that, and so I think actually we have something to help our colleagues who do more comprehensive high schools work because the messages that we're having here is that personalization. You have to, a comprehensive high school of 3,000 kids. Some of the challenges here is, in fact, that students need real relationships with adults, caring adults in a setting on a long term. There's a lot that the traditional system can do so that those students feel their place there and don't have to fall through cracks or have serious concern challenges before they come back to us and we give them what they needed all along. So I do think it's a two-way street. And I'm hoping that there, and I do appreciate the comments about talking to the people who are knocking on doors. So I'm really glad to have your participation on that part, and looking forward to having the County Boards Association connect with you. We're already thinking about how we, in fact, might use you at a conference or some webinars. Yes, yes,
So, David, I know we're getting closer to our
yes.
time, and with that, we'll turn it over to you. I know there's some things coming up with ACCBE and County Soups, and so perhaps you could speak to that, and then hat tip to the link in the chat around the evaluation for this session. It is super helpful for ACCBE and RAPSA in making sure that we bring you guys great programming going forward. And so, let me turn it over to David.
Well, great. Well, this has been a good beginning in some ways because it has brought probably for the first time, and I want to give Kai and others credit for getting boards and the rest of this community together in this webinar. And so that's really, I think, an important first step. So if you're walking away a little frustrated because we didn't answer all the questions or all the answers weren't out on the table, that's true. But it's because it's a beginning. Second, I do want to recommend and encourage everyone to do an evaluation. We learn a lot from those, and so I encourage you. It is something that we look at each and every one of them, and we're not sure what our best path forward is, so we need to do that. And then second, the ACCBE is in fact doing a lot of work with our colleagues throughout the state. The type of stuff we're learning about the excellent programs that are occurring and all that. We're trying to highlight those on our event. So I encourage everyone to sign up for our newsletter. Go to our website and just say you want to connect. But we have ongoing activities that are coming up. And the fun one that's a little closer to home for us than maybe some of you is that many of us are up for elections, and we want to talk to each other about the type of things we want to about to our communities, about the way we serve, and what critical roles county offices have. So our website's really simple: www.accbe.org. Um, and on behalf of the 350 or so of us that do serve at a county level, and our partners, which I need to recognize, which are county superintendents of schools. This has been a great opportunity for us today, and all of our other partners in that close thing. I am looking forward to this work going forward. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Kai, for any closeout you want. But we're excited. This went just what we wanted to, which was a good conversation that's only beginning.
No, David, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. We know you're in Sacramento doing some of the good work. To Bina, to Deborah, to Susan, to Ashley Lugo, I know who's here from the county soups, and of course to UCLA, to Joe and Geneva and their team, and quite frankly, and most importantly, to all of the our community of learning and practice that are here. Couldn't call out everybody, but rest assured, this is like David said, a beginning and not an endings. And so, with that, thank you for filling out the survey, and it's great to see everyone. Have a great day. Take care.